Hello?
Everybody should be good to go. Good morning. This is Brenna McDowell. We will be getting here in just a second. How we're going to do this, Renaud is going to go through the presentation, which should take approximately 1 hour to complete. At that point, he will take questions from all members. I've got Peter Martelli in and Mary Johnson, as well as the audience in France. For Peter and Mary that are currently on now, if you have questions you would like to send to me or Renaud, feel free to do so. Those will be answered toward the end. I will also unmute you guys at the end of the presentation so that you may ask questions at that point. You may notice that you have a feature to raise your hand. That helps to alleviate talking over one another. And that is pretty much all the housekeeping that I have to give. We will be recording this, which has begun already. And Renaud, go ahead and take over.
Thank you very much, Renaud. So thank you for everybody. For those who are here today, those who are in California. I know it's early, Alaska. I don't know about the time change. Probably it's the same. It's even earlier. Well, thank you very much, Mary. So for some reason, we'll have all the French officers coming at 5, right? Yeah, there was a confusion, but that's okay. I debriefed the project to the French already last December, so I'll focus this presentation for a U.S. audience, approximately an hour long, and then discussion, questions, as much as we want to. So the plan of the presentation is the following one. If this wants to work. No? Okay. Yes. So we'll quickly go over the context, the background, and the objectives of the project. Then we'll quickly go over the different phases of the project. Then on part 2, I will spend some time reminding us of the core concepts of high reliability organizing. Then I'll review the main findings of the project and then expose the recommendations before concluding. Background objectives. So the context, the background is pretty well known. So very quickly, we have a number of trends: global warming, the patterns of urban development, biomass accumulation, the growing expectations from population, government, and limited resources. All that combined with one of the consequences being that large or complex wildland fires will occur more frequently and will probably be, at least some of them, more severe. So the idea of the, I put some of the, some figures here. Well, you know this, it comes from NIFC, this chart, which is pretty eloquent about the increase of large fires. It's interesting to see also that you've coined new terms to describe this new phenomenon. Asymmetric, irregular fire, mega fire, 0.25% fire, or national fire of national significance. All the only figures that I could find for the Europe was these ones. Got the burn area and the number of fires. So it seems to show that there's some kind of stabilization, although are included a number of fires, small and large fires. So we don't really know if the the portion of large fires is increasing or not. The recording system is probably not complete yet. And we don't know if it's a stable situation or if this is an unstable situation with what we've seen in Greece, for example, Portugal, Spain, with really large fires. So I was a little bit provocative and say, is it stability or disasters waiting to happen? So the project's objectives are the following. Let me first expose the scope of the study. The general problem is how to manage systems that are fire dependent. But that's not, we'll be focusing only on fire suppression operations, not on the entire problem. And within fire suppression operation, we looked only at incident management teams. So the objectives of the projects were improve incident management team performance in complex settings, draw on lessons learned by high reliability organizations, step outside our boxes through an international perspective, advance HRO knowledge, and start building a French-American collaborative network. The participants on the French side, you have the National Training School, Valabre, the fire department, University of Aix-Marseille, and on the and their U.S. counterparts were the Wildland Lessons Learned Center, NAFRI, the Forest Service Fire and Aviation Management, and UC Berkeley, especially the Center for Catastrophic Risk Management. And the main financial support came from the French Ministry of the Environment and the Fulbright program. So let me go over the different phases of the project. I'll start by saying a word about the research teams, then we'll go over the project phases and list the products. So the two words that I wanted to mention about the research teams that we, because we are not firefighters, we wanted to have observation teams that included firefighters. So we have mixed teams. We had mixed teams observing and discussing our observations. We also took the entry-level courses. The different phases of our project. So the project started with a kickoff in May 2007. Then the first phase was just a general preparation and with first observation, interviews, observation of training here at the National Training School at NAFRI, or with the complex incident management course, observed real operations and took this training. The second phase was devoted to the analysis of archival data and the closer observation of IMT trainings. So we saw different full-scale exercises here in California. We participated to HRO audits. We observed Type 1 team trainings at NAFRI, and we attended several pre-season meetings and workshops. And this, I think, is the picture of when the French officers went to NAFRI early 2008. Phase 3 was direct observation of real operations, and maybe you can recognize here Colin Roberts, who went to one of the fires. Camille was with us too. So in the U.S., we went to the Zaca fire, Meriwether fire, his own complex, Slide fire. And the last phase was the simulation exercises. So it's just a picture of the layout of the simulator of the National Training School here. Just some features of these exercises. So it was December 2008. We had George Custer's NEMO team with other experienced firefighters like John Truitt, Curtis Heaton, and other I can't remember, and Luc Jordas SDIS 13 team, and they went through 6 virtual reality-based simulation exercises. So it was the idea was to put both teams separately, one after the other, but to put put them in the same operational conditions and see how they would handle the same conditions. Exercises lasted from 4 to 6 or 7 hours. We had cross debriefings. Was observed by the French National Wildland Fire experts. We recorded a number of data, including heart coherence. Everybody basically was videotaped. It was broadcast live online. We recorded and coded over 200 hours. And we put the data, we made the data available online so that anyone, researcher or trainer, could work on them if interested. And we have a dedicated website. So the different products that came out of the project, we had a number of publications, either in management journals or professional journals. We attended a number of workshops. There's a neighborhood in the Lessons Learned Center, Community Center, this dedicated website. We participated to different audits conducted by Dave, actually. We contributed to the design of HRO training for the S520. We designed the training of, let's say, the French S520 and SDIS 13 training, HRO-based training. Then I will present a number of findings and recommendations. And on the French side, as far as follow-up is concerned, what was interesting is that some of the national experts, French national experts, who participated to the project and who observed, in particular, the simulation exercises, were convinced that the French doctrine had to be updated, upgraded, improved, and are putting together working groups to work on that. So that's a very nice outcome. Also, one of the things that emerged from this project is the design of HRO metrics, how to measure how well a team is performing in terms of HRO processes. So we've developed HRO metrics, and the project to build a prototype was funded by the 6 universities of Southeast France. And we've just submitted 3 large-scale research proposals. We're waiting for the answers this month. Okay, now let's move on and go over the main concepts of HRO. So HRO, what is it? Then how did the HRO, how was HRO introduced to the wildland fire community, and how was it received? And finally, what's our approach? What's our HRO approach in this project? There are a number of concepts. Just for fun, I put some of them. So it's worth taking a few minutes to explain what HRO is focusing on. So the starting point is that accidents happen because small errors develop and combine into unexpected ways. That's the shared view of accidents. You know, it's not the domino model, the Swiss cheese model anymore, but it takes more into account complexity with this resonance phenomenon of different errors combining. And HRO are organizations that give a strong response to weak signals in order to detect and contain errors before they combine in potential bit failures. So strong response to weak signals, detect early and contain errors. That's the general idea. Now how do they do that, or what do they focus on? What angle is HRO taking to do that? So I'm going to use Churchill, which is not usual for a French citizen, but that's okay. So probably all of you know this citation from Churchill, who found out that Singapore was, you know, vulnerable at some point. And the citation is, well, why didn't I know? Why didn't my advisors know? Why wasn't I told? Why didn't I ask? And that's, I think, the citation makes pretty clear the angle that HRO is taking is that failure as well as safety is a collective outcome. Why didn't I know? Why wasn't I told? It's a collective outcome, and the second idea is that the focus of HRO is on the quality of interactions. This collective outcome comes from the structures that are built through interactions. And I'm not going to go into details now, but when I say here and in the rest of the document, when I'll say discussions, quality of interactions, I'll refer to that, and that is not just it's not the idea that it's nice to talk. The quality of interactions refers to cognitive processes that are defined in the HRO theory, but that I don't have time to review. But quality of interactions is what is at the base. That's the idea. I just wanted to show here that this is at the base of HRO. Now, some years now ago, HRO was introduced in the Wildland fire community for various reasons. The main two reasons was the study and the reflection that happened after South Canyon, I think, yeah, and with identifying the need to go from to change cultures. And the other idea was to change cultures and to become a learning organization. And the other idea is this complexity that we mentioned in the context, and to help the organization handle more complex situations. And HRO could be a tool to do that. So a number of things have been done, like workshops, professional research papers, stories, case studies, presentations, videos, coaching, inclusion with S520, readings. Now staff writes, tactical decision games, 10-table exercises include HRO principles. And more recently, HRO has been is a part of different programs like leadership development, human performance improvement, risk assessment, systems thinking, etc. And it seems that HRO was well received because it offers language, concepts, it labels, it puts a label on what people are doing right and help them to discuss and improve, particularly in through the enhancement of communication and knowledge flow. And the final observation, which is important for the project approach, is that it was best received when integrated with other existing tools. And that's an observation that is that we took into account and which is in line with our approach that I'm going to detail right now. So our approach in this study. So to manage complexity, HRO urges to aggressively seek weak signals that things may be what we think they are by doing a number of things. So for example, be aware of routines stemming from past successes, and don't avoid complacency, doubt existing interpretations, and be reluctant to simplify, moderately adhere to plans and strategies, question hierarchical expertise, engage the unknown. I've framed on purpose this to make it to exaggerate a little bit, so that it can support the next point. Many times, or sometimes at least, people can get puzzled by this kind of advice or guidelines, because they feel that it can cause disorganization of collective action if everybody is doubting, you know, hierarchy, intent or expertise, the plan, the existing routines, etc. You might get disorganized. Even in action, if you're overcautious about, if you're not sure of your knowledge of what you can do, if you're overcautious, it can paralyze action. So there's a risk of inaction. Or even unsafe behaviors. Engage the unknown to have more information and get a bit more accurate picture of the situation can be unsafe sometimes. And let me give another example of the point I want to make. Let's take the example of learning from past failures. And you can find two opposite viewpoints. You'll have some people who will say, well, create a new rule to avoid making the same mistake under the same conditions. And you will also have people that will say, don't create a new rule because the exact same conditions will not occur, and it would undermine our ability to deal with other situations. So we recognize that both viewpoints are valid. They have grains of truth. But the interesting thing is that it represents two fundamental processes that we've labeled control processes and mindfulness processes. On the control side, these processes try to anticipate all system conditions, then determine ambiguously the function of the organization, then log correct job performance in formal procedures, and the chain of command is here to preserve this perfect model. On the other side, the mindfulness processes acknowledge the limitations of existing organizational knowledge and build capacities to detect small changes in the environment and create novel responses to a changing environment. So you have control processes and mindfulness processes, and both are necessary. And you see that the creating a new rule will fall under the control processes category, and don't create a new rule would be under the mindfulness processes. Both processes are necessary. The control processes are necessary because it ensures the effectiveness of collective action. It ensures that the organization is well adapted to its environment. And mindfulness processes are necessary to adapt. So mindfulness processes are about adaptability when controlled processes are about adaptation. If you express only controlled processes, you run the risk of overconfidence. You may solve the wrong problem precisely. And if you only express mindfulness processes, you run the risk of being overcautious or having coordination problems. So the idea is that both processes are necessary, but they're conflicting. One will say create a new rule, the other one will don't create a new rule, so that they're conflicting. Control processes are about reducing, optimizing the allocation of resources, reducing slack, enforcing the prevailing norms, etc. When mindfulness processes are about developing internal variety, developing alternative ideas or behaviors. So when two processes are conflicting and necessary, but conflicting, we label this situation the tension between control and mindfulness. So our approach is to manage the tension between control and mindfulness. And we think it's going back to the observation that in a wildland fire community was best received when integrated to existing knowledge or tools. We think that by having this approach, we'll do just that. We'll take into account the two viewpoints that are necessary, that are legitimate, valid, necessary, and show how they can relate to one another. So we think it's going to be more easily received, and this is a more dynamic and holistic view. Another way to, last slide, another way to look at what was just said is that let's take the this curve. So the x-axis is time, and the y-axis is, for example, the failure rate. The first thing is that you design good processes, technology, routines, norms, etc., to have your failure rate go down, and then you see that it plateaus. And you'll have, so you turn to a psychologist and you say, okay, let's work on the human factors, and then they will say, yeah, sure, reliability is social. So we can help you work on that, and your failure rate will go down. But what's missed in this picture, which is found a lot, is that when you're here, it's not like, okay, we've taken care of the engineering, I mean the design, the process, all the control processes part, and now let's work on humans. What's missed is that if you really want to go down here, well, you need both. You still to work on your control processes as well as on your mindfulness processes. And why it's difficult? Because it's interacting and often it's conflicting, hence the idea of tension. So when you're here, you still to do that, that's go down all the way down here, to basically reduce uncertainty as much as possible, but here you will always have this irreducible uncertainty that you need to deal with. But when you're here, you need to do both. Try to reduce uncertainty, control processes, and work with the irreducible, deal with the irreducible uncertainty, mindful processes. So to sum up, HRO seeks to pick up weak signals through heat-pool interactions. It's been the HRO material has been well received in the wildland fire community, and our approach aims at giving new tools to better relate HRO, all these mindfulness processes, with existing knowledge and tools. All right, main findings. So the main findings will be mainly presented in a comparative mode, because I think it's by contrasting the French and US team, it exhibits in a nice way the differences and the findings. So general features of US and French teams. Then we'll show that they exhibit two different sources of high reliability. The US is a more anticipative, and the French more in the resilient part of high reliability. We'll see the strengths and weaknesses of each organizing mode, and we'll propose a generalization of strategies to increase high reliability. The interesting things is that I'd like to start with is this phrase that we hear over and over. So what do incident management teams? They bring order to chaos, right? So what's interesting is that on the French side, the idea is we organize chaos, and it's different. On the French side, the idea is to respond as quickly as possible, or respond to the incident, and tolerating some internal chaos. Where on the other side, the idea is that the processes and the internal order will impose and eventually conduct or lead to order in the situation. And on one side, bring order to chaos through processes, professionalism, etc. Through internal order. On the French side, we organize chaos. We know it's chaos. We try to organize it. I'd like to focus on the interaction part, so I'll go briefly, and if there are questions on this part, we'll discuss them at the end. But briefly, the focus on the time horizon is more comparatively, again, on the short term of the French side, action-reaction mode. On the US side, it's more anticipation, more planning, middle, long term. The type of obligation, so it's more process-oriented for the US team, where it's more focused on the result, and it's related to my first point. Organized chaos, we put out fire even if it's a little disorganized, or we tolerate a little disorganization. And here it's important to have follow rigorously the processes, so that at the end the situation evolves in a good way. The attitude towards external stakeholders is also different. It's a constraint that is managed with transparency on the US team side, and it's more an endured constraint on the French side. As far as the organizing command, so as far as the dispatch centers, so it's staffed with differently. You have firefighters, like at the CODIS here, and you have administrative personnel in the US with people who respond to the IC's requests. When here the CODIS here starts fighting the fire before the first IC arrives on scene. The command is more distributed in US teams and more centralized in French team. Another interesting feature is the dynamics of the structuring of the organization. It's bottom up, and I'll explain why with the US team, and top down with the French team. The unit of analysis with US organizations are divisions. The assignments are given to divisions. The way to look at things is based on divisions. When there are too many divisions, you branch it for coordination purposes. And there's another logic with in French IMTs. The IC gives general mission to branches, and if the work to do is too big, they create divisions. But on the US side, you have divisions you branch if you need it to better coordinate them. That's why I said it was bottom up. And on the French side, it's give broad missions to the branches, and if there are too many resources, they create divisions within branches. Process. Let me go quickly over that, and just to say it's more formalized, more distributed. It's a distributed process with the US team, and under-formalized and centralized with the French team. Let's go right to the interaction, because as I said earlier, HROs focus on the quality of interactions. So what was very interesting, especially during the simulation exercises, is to see the contrast between the interaction mode between US and French team. On the US, with US teams, the interactions were spaced, long, and people were discussing. On the French side, the interactions were frequent, short, and codified, structured. The norm on the US side, or tacit norm, is no news is good news. On the French side, it's don't just be concise and precise. Ne raconte pas ta vie pour les Français. So let me just so to measure that, so we've measured 2,000 interactions, 2,000 roughly. You see. So the y-axis is the number of interactions, and the x-axis is the average, the mean duration of each interaction. So it's clear that the blue being the French and the red being the US team. So you can see that most interactions for the French teams are low duration and frequent, and the opposite for the US teams. So we measured that by introducing coupling. It's the number of interaction. We found useful to introduce a number which is the number of interaction divided by the average duration of interactions. So if you have a high number of interaction and a low duration, the number is high. And if you have not very infrequent interaction, but when they occur they're long, then this number is low. And this is a number which is related to the notion of coupling. So you can see that the coupling between individuals is high in the French team, for the French team, and it's low for the US team. Why? The French, when they interact, are so it's short, frequent, concise, precise. They exchange parameters, so that everybody can perform their routines and know what they have to do with this parameter. But it's very poor in context, because they just give right flank, left flank, or whatever. But it's very poor in context. When and the opposite, when people speak to one another, not frequently, when they need to talk and to interact, they need to catch up. They need to say, oh, that's what's going on in my division, and that's what is going on in my division, and okay, and they talk for a longer time. And when they do that, they exchange more contextual cues. So they reconstruct a more accurate, a richer picture of what's going on. So you see in this graphics that so the nodes are the team members. So for example, you have air attack, the IC, planning ops, branches, etc. And this I don't know if you can see it. This curve here is the link between the nodes are the couplings between individuals. So if you have, like, for example, between planning ops and the IC, it's thick, means that they are tightly coupled, and when the ops and the air attack, in this case, was loosely coupled. And here, this curve is the global coupling of the organization, the average coupling, let's say. What's interesting is the contrast between the French and the Americans. So you see that the French, they're more tightly coupled. It's another illustration of the graphics that I showed you before. And look at the global coupling. Not only is it twice as high on average, but also, with lots wider variation. So, where do I want to lead you? It's to find the sources of control and mindfulness, of coherence, and the source of flexibility, the sources of adaptation, and the sources of adaptability. Where or how these teams express control processes and mindfulness processes. Where does it come from? On the U.S. side, the control process of the coherence is mainly obtained through organizational culture, the high codification of processes, professional norms, socialization of teams or professions before the incident. And the flexibility during the incident comes from this high decentralization and what's called disjoint incrementalism. It's little units that are loosely coupled, but who can adjust very finely to their environment. That's the notion of disjoint incrementalism. Loosely coupled units that can adapt very well to their local environment. And by doing that, they're manifest at the system level flexibility, adaptability. That's why I used the phrases that the U.S. team resembles a loosely coupled system of highly normalized units, whereas the French team, to be concise, the coherence, the control process come from the strong centralization of the system around the IC, and the flexibility comes from all the little variations about the standard processes. This is a source of flexibility. The ability to improvise and to be resilient. And the overall flexibility is also a function of the IC's quality. The IC, since it relies so much on the IC, if he's good, or then he'll be flexible. If he's not, that's why I propose to describe this system as tightly coupled system of intrinsically varying units. So loosely coupled system of normalized units, tightly coupled system of varying units. Try to capture what's been said. So this needs to have two sources of high reliability. Remember, HROs try to detect errors early and contain them. So you have different sets of principles. Principles that relate to early detection, which are anticipation principles, and processes that relate to the ability to contain errors, so containment principles. And obviously, when an organization that would display none of these principles would be a low reliability organization, and those who have two kinds of principles are HROs. And that's where we could put the French and the US teams. This loosely coupled system is able to detect really small variations in each segment of the environment, which is pretty good at anticipating. In the HRO sense, detects weak signals. When the French team is mainly good at being resilient, and obviously the idea is to move from their position to the HRO position. As far as strengths and weaknesses of this organizing mode, well, let's start with the French. So the French, the strength is that they can be really responsive, high responsiveness. If the IC decides to do that, then very quickly the entire organization will move into that direction and implement these tactics or whatever. The other advantage is the high awareness of interdependencies between different variables of the environment. But the limit is that it relies so much on the IC that just one brain cannot handle complex operation. So there are limits in terms of complexity or size of incident. And we said also that they were good because at being resilient because they had they could improvise, but the other side of the coin is that there are varying qualities of or consequences of improvisations. They improvised a backfire, for example, during The Sims, but it escaped, and it escaped and burned houses, etc. So it wasn't a good thing. And the fact that it's centralized, you get, what's classical, you get distortion in communication. And also the fact that it's centralized, the center, the IC, or the guys at the ICP, over-filter the information that is coming at them because there are so much information they need to filter it. When they filter it, it's a weakness because they can miss with signals. On the US side, so the strength is the strength of loosely coupled systems is this ability to adapt locally, to integrate numerous constraints, different domains, resource management, political, on division, so whatever, generally speaking, various constraints. The weakness is that each unit has a piece of the global situation, and that's the cognition is distributed, so it's harder to integrate this distributed cognition and to be well aware of the interdependencies. There's some inertia in these kind of systems. A certain overconfidence in the ICS and the processes, the ICS, and the inflation of rules. Yeah, I'll go quickly on that. Yeah, just to show very typical observed what I call corrective measures of the weaknesses of each organizing mode. For example, the French, we've seen that it relied so much on one individual, the IC, that they could not handle, just one person could not handle complex situation. Well, you can observe that the IC tries to simplify external constraints by discussion with the agency administrators, with discussion with residents and communities, whatever, but it's trying all the time to simplify its constraints and to make the situation so they can handle the situation. And on the US side, all the efforts on briefings, planning meetings, CNG meetings, etc., is a way to create this global, picture, a shared picture of what's going on, because cognition is so much distributed. Or trigger points. Trigger points is also a way to try to overcome inertia that is possible. I'll go to this first generalization of so remember the question was how to manage the tension between control and mindfulness, and we found that both teams, we found that both teams used 4 different tactics or strategies to manage this tension. So first one was manipulating, alternating, specializing, and diffracting. So it's not still very academic terms, but I think we can work on that to make it more firefighting, to sound more like firefighting terms. Manipulating. So the idea is simple. If you have you have 2 processes, control, mindfulness, that can be conflicting. So one of the idea of this strategy is to say, all right, let's influence our environment. That's why it's called manipulating. Let's influence our environment so that we can express only one type of processes, for example, control. So let's manipulate our environment so that we can express only control processes. So we're not expressing mindful processes. So since both are necessary, after a while it's going to get us into trouble if we cannot express mindfulness processes. So the idea is, let's influence our environment and express only control processes and be successful before the inconvenience of expressing the mindfulness process, not expressing mindfulness processes occur. So it's influencing your environment so that you're fine with expressing only one process. It can be the control or the mindfulness process. Let's go to the next one. The other strategy is also simple. Let's alternate. Let's express control processes and then mindfulness processes, because it's difficult to express both at the same time because they're conflicting. Let's alternate. And there is a gradation in the contingency of this this alternating. For example, by construction, it's the what I mean by that is that US teams, so we've seen that there are control processes that have been expressed basically before the incident by the training to the ICS, this high codification of processes, the socialization, the training, etc. So before the incident, you have the control processes that are expressed, and during the incident, it's a loosely coupled system with mainly mindfulness processes. So it's an alternation between both types of processes. But you can also alternate by plan. What I mean is that when you hold for example, a planning meeting, it's a time where you reassess the situation. So you express mindfulness processes, and then you implement your what you've decided, the plan. So during a moment you express mindfulness processes, and then you mainly express control processes, so you alternate. Then you can alternate more dynamically. For example, we mentioned the trigger points. So given the situation, you can set trigger points, and these trigger points or the things that you will pay attention to will trigger mindfulness processes. So the fact that you put a framework on what you should pay attention to is a control process, but it triggers mindful processes. But you see that it's more dynamic or more contingent to the situation than just planning meeting each day at the same time. And finally, you can alternate by, discretely. What I mean by that is that when the IC, for example, has a long conversation with a branch director or division soup, they're in a mindfulness process mode. And it's at the discretion of the IC. So, okay, let's investigate that, or let's talk with this guy, and it's whenever he wants to. So it's even more spontaneous than the trigger points. So you have a gradation into the second strategy, which is alternating. Then you have specializing. The idea here is, okay, let's have part of the organization that is about control and part of the organization which is about mindfulness. An example, the IC, when the IC, one of the roles of the IC is to pay attention to the functioning of his team. Are people talking to one another? Is knowledge flowing correctly? So he has this specific role is a mindfulness role. And when the others are in a more control mode. It can be also specializing organizational processes. What example can I give for that one? Specializing. Nothing that comes to mind. We'll go over that if you have questions. Or the final strategy is what I call diffracting. So it's about setting, by lack of better term, flexible norms. An example outside the fighting world would be the rule that was reported, for example, by Carlin Roberts about the Navy. Don't break a rule unless safety is at stake or jeopardized, something like that. Never break a rule unless you need to, basically. This is a norm that recognizes that the organization knowledge has limitations. So at the same time, it says trust organizational knowledge, don't break a rule, and at the same time, you recognize that all the knowledge encoded in rules has limitations. So you can break rules if you need to. So you see that it captures the tension between control and mindfulness within this norm. So that why I call them flexible norms. And the idea is that, or let's take a firefighting example, LCS. So lookout, communication, LCE, escape routes, safety zones. At the same time, people feel, it says that people can trust the organization because, and its ability to monitor the fire and provide safety if needed. But at the same time, it says, or implicitly, the fire is still capable of surprising us. So trust the ability of the organization to do something and distrust it at the same time. So this captures, again, this tension that we're talking about since some time now. And by developing and training to people to this kind of norms, it makes them do things because they make sense, not out of compliance. And that's the whole idea of this strategy. So what these were general strategies that were observed, and we can say that so each were using these 4 strategies at different levels, but we can say that they had a dominant tension management strategy. For the French team, it was specializing. The IC, the one who had the flexibility, and the rest of the organization is in control mode. For the US team, it's, as we've seen, more about alternating. All the control, the coherence is built before through processes and training, and during the incidents, mainly mindful processes that occur. And each of these management strategy has a validity domain, is successful in a certain domain. If we break down complexity into these two components, the number of environment variables, the y-axis, and the degree of interdependencies between the variables, the x-axis, then it shows that, I mean, the different validity domains are ones that are shown here. So a few environment variables and that can be interdependent are well handled by the specializing strategy of the French team. But a large number of environment variables with moderate interdependency with the variables are best handled by the alternating strategies. And both strategies would gain using more of the diffracting strategy that I just mentioned. So to sum up, the French and the US teams exhibit two different sources of reliability: anticipative for the US team, resilient for the French team. This is due to their dominant strategy to manage the tension between control and mindfulness processes. So it's about alternating for the US team and specializing for the French team. And we've identified four general, generally speaking, we've identified 4 tension management strategies and their validity domain. Now, how does it translate into recommendations, which is our final part? There are 3 areas. Obviously, the first one about managing the tension between control and mindfulness. Second, about developing HRO-based training tools. And the third one about developing HRO in the wildland fire community. So we've based our, what we've said about the fact that the control and mindfulness processes are conflicting. Where there are some times where they're not, when more control leads to more mindfulness. And whenever this happens, or if we can create the conditions under which this can happen, then we should obviously do that. They most often conflict, but sometimes more control gives more leads to more mindfulness. And there are situations in which it's the case. So the first recommendation is encouraging situations where control increases mindfulness. For example, the trigger points. And by trigger points, I said generalized trigger points. I mean by that is that, what I mean by that is, by generalized trigger points is when performing an action, the idea is to explicit the conditions under which what you're doing makes sense, is valid, useful, or makes sense. The fact that you explicit the conditions under which a given task makes sense will lead you to detect sooner the signals or the things that make this condition that the conditions are changing. You will detect sooner when the conditions are changing and when what you're doing is not appropriate anymore. So either in interactions, in institutionalized briefings, in meetings, planning meetings, and whenever, each time someone explicit the conditions under which what he's saying is valid, useful, makes sense, etc., it will increases mindfulness is in the sense that people will detect sooner changes in condition that would make this task useless or dangerous or whatever. And the example is typical example is stick briefings. I don't know if you're it's a format of briefings. A stick is an acronym for situation, task, intent, concern, and calibrate. So situation, what is a situation? Task, so what should we do about it? Intent, here's why we should do that. Concern, that's the trigger point. Concern is what should I pay attention to that would make this intent or task dangerous, useless, inappropriate. It's the concern. And the last one is calibrate, I think, and it means now talk to me. So it's a briefing format, and the two interesting things are concern. You know, what are the boundary conditions? What are the validity conditions of what we're doing? And the last one is also good, which is talk to me. And from an HRO perspective, the discussion, the interaction between individuals should be encouraged. So that's the first idea or situations where when control increases mindfulness. Second one. So it's the idea is to put a little bit more accuracy in the assignments or division assignments that we can find in IAPs. What we can observe, so I don't know if it's all the time or it's rare or whatever, but I've observed a lot, we've observed a lot, vague assignments like basically do as much as you can between A and B in terms of constructing a line. So it's vague. If you're a little bit more accurate, it doesn't necessarily deny the fact that the division soup must be autonomous to assess the situation and do whatever it needs to. But if you're a little bit more accurate, then you precise first your intent, the IC's intent, then you will, what's interesting is that it triggers discussion, either with the branch or with the ops, about here's what I see and what's going to make the assignment impossible. And then it triggers a discussion about, you know, then what to do next. And that's the idea, is that this control phase of having a little bit more accurate assignments should be followed by a mindfulness phase of this discussion. Yes, that's possible. Or no, I've seen this weak signals, or here's the scenario that is emerging, or whatever, so that people can discuss. Remember that HRO is about interaction. If it triggers interaction, it's good. It's not to deny the autonomy of the division soup. That's not in the sense that it's meant. And if, as I've read or discussed with others, this strategy is let's engage fire when the probability of success are high, then this should, if the probability of success is high, then this should translate into somewhat accurate assignment for each division. You know, the reasons why we think that the probability of success is high should translate into the assignments. The third one is something that is already, I believe, motion. It's moving from rules to principles, but the point is, the idea here is to when you do that, and we see how the inflation of rules could be harmful because it prevents people from being being self-reflective. They do things out of compliance and not because they make sense. If you adopt key principles, imperative principles, well then the local adaptation of a general norm or principle, the adaptation of this norm to a local situation is now up to the firefighters. So the idea is that this translation should be conducted more through richer or richer interactions between firefighters. Okay, less rule, more general principle, with no deviation to this principle, but by definition, the principle is general. So when you want to apply your principles to a given situation, you have to translate how you have to find out how to translate this principle to local situations. And the point we are making here is to make sure that there are norms that this translation should be more collective through dialogue or interactions. And then flexible norms, but we've mentioned it already. So that's the first part. Whenever control can increase mindfulness, then let's do that. The second part is, the second idea is, okay, you have a dominant strategy to manage tension. Let's develop corrective measures, actions that will mitigate these vulnerabilities, or the weaknesses of the dominant strategy. And there are 4. One of the reasons why, back up a little bit. In the case of the U.S. teams, we've seen that it's a loosely coupled system. So the main, with distributed cognition, that may limit the responsiveness of the organization, and with some, and create some inertia. One of the things that increases this loose coupling is such thing as the presumption of logic. The others, our division soup or the others, do what they're doing because it makes sense. It's logic. When you see what the other actions that the action that the others conduct, you'll find justifications why it's logic that they do that. But this is what we call the presumption of logic. And for example, a good illustration is non-use is a norm. Non-use is good news. I don't have any communication with this guy. He knows what he's doing. It means that he's in charge. He does the right thing. Now, if you start changing this presumption of logic, which is a norm that comes from training, socialization, and organization culture, etc. Well, then you will maybe have more interaction with the individual, just checking. I've seen you do that. Are you aware of, or whatever? And how to get people to change this presumption of logic is first to make them aware through training of their presumption. Also introduce strangers novel logic, etc. And for example, international programs are a way to see different logics and to step outside our box and maybe start changing the presumption of logic. He's doing that, but I've seen the others when they do that, it makes sense too. Well, let's check, etc. The other idea is what's called the equalization of participation rates, but it means that the looseness of the organization comes also from the fact that people contribute at different times. So they have different information inputs. So they make different assumptions about what's going on. And these varying assumptions about what's going on, their different representations of reality, make them increases the looseness between the entities. So whenever they get together, this is what is meant by equalization of participation rates, are always a great opportunity to create this common operating picture. And so the recommendation is make these collective moments more effective. The planning meeting, the pre-planning meeting, the planning meetings are often meetings during which each function is just saying something, but there's absolutely no discussion with the rest of the functions. And even worse, I've seen times where the important stuff was said outside the meetings. So it's not a way to increase this heedful interactions between people. So the recommendation is have people interact during pre-planning meetings, more people interact during pre-planning meetings or planning meetings. And I've seen cases where it was the case, and the information that is shared, the decisions that are made in these cases are have no comparison. It's striking. Another idea is to enhance the role of branch directors. Branch directors are many times a weak point. They're here to coordinate divisions, but they're oftentimes they don't play an effective role. They don't have meetings with their division. I mean, they do, but not as often as they could have meetings with the division soups, create this big picture, discussing the assignments, etc., etc. Well, if you have questions, we can discuss it afterwards, but I'd like to move on. Introduce some flexibility in the ICS process. What I mean by that is, I'm just going to give an example. A very large fire, Zaka fire. So the fire was almost contained. The helicopter was tilt over. They shut down the air program. The same time you had a spot fire, it was outside the containment area into the wilderness. So it's a completely different situation. It was early July, a completely different situation. So I was there when at the time where people found out about it. 10 minutes later, planning meeting. Okay, so the planning meeting was held with the plan, with everything that was designed before this situation. And not a word was said about the fact that it was a completely different game now. And so the idea is, I don't know, maybe if you I mean, the planning meeting could have waited for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever. And I have many examples like that. Can discuss it afterwards. So that's what I meant by introducing some flexibility in the ICS processes. Planning meeting at 1700 may not be all, or whatever at the time maybe. It's not so rigid as it could be. And last reason why system can get more and more loosely coupled is that when the feedback between actions and consequences are not clear. So all the things that could increase the feedback between action and consequences are good. The current professional norms emphasize the respect of autonomy and often blur the feedback, direct feedback. You know, these meetings, planning meetings, team closeouts, even after action reviews, etc., where people say, "Good job, good job." You know, you don't give feedbacks when you do that. A word about managing the tension in the wildland-urban interface. Try to finish quickly. two ideas. The first idea is that the organizational response should fit the situation, not the opposite. What I mean by that is that it seems that type 3 teams, or teams that do the initial attack or extending the attack on type 3 fires, sometimes act too soon, as if nothing was possible and that it was going to be a type 2 fire. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because they don't take the measures that could be taken, yes, it becomes a type 2 fire. But because of their presumption, first, that they act too soon, as if it wasn't a type 3 fire anymore. And by the time the type 2 team or the type 1 team arrives, obviously it's the case. We can discuss it too. Another idea is an idea that emerged with the Berkeley colleagues is to work with communities with the simulator tool. So I don't know if you're familiar with this tool. No. So it's a tool where you create a real area with satellites, photos, and pictures, and you recreate an area. So, for example, the French teams have southern France and work on this virtual reality platform on their real terrain in southern France. So it's a tool that recreates the surroundings where they set fire and where an incident management team can interact and have action on the fire, drop retardant water or spray water or whatever, and obviously has an impact on the fire, and things evolve. It's like imagine Second Life, so it's Second Life but for firefighters, basically, to make it simple. So one of the ideas to recreate, to do that, but with communities. So you take a community with their surroundings, you set the fire, and you have a joint exercise training. And the idea here is, first, that it really will increase, so residents that will join this could be at home, behind their computer, obviously in line connected to the simulator, like a serious game, and play their own role. But what could be interesting by doing that is that it would be dramatically show and increase their awareness of their vulnerability, show the impact of preventing measures, because in the surroundings that you recreate, you take into account the fact that they have or not cleared around their houses, and you'll see, because of the fire behavior model, the difference that it will make if the fire goes over their house. They be aware of what's possible on the firefighter response, what's not possible, and the idea is obviously to create an awareness and a momentum in the community, and to prepare them before the fires. Training tools. I'll go quickly. So the idea is to design training tools that can manage interactive complexity. Interactive complexity, so things that can combine variables of the environment that get combined into surprising, something that surprises people. The simulator is a good tool, but I'll go quickly. Another tool is what I showed you is the couplings, the measurement of coupling, which is very easy to do because it's based on who talks to whom and how long. It's very easy either to measure it with sensors or to notice it, because it will help trainers to locate mindful processes low couplings, or control processes, high coupling. I won't spend much time on this, but it's the couplings of an organism of the French team here. When the coupling is low, it's mindfulness processes. When it's high, it's control processes. To go quickly, when you compare the variation of the coupling to the situation, the crisis situation or a different situation, you see that it reflects very well what happened. But the interesting thing is that I see here okayed a backfire that happened here, but he okayed the backfire in a situation where the global coupling of the organization was high, which means that only control processes were going on. And when the organization is about to take a very important decision, and it was for the simulation, important decision, it should be more in a mindful mode, in a mode where you reassess the situation, you take time to interact with the, rich, context-rich information. And so that was interesting to see that they took this decision with high coupling, so they were in a control mode, and that the backfire then escaped and you had a crisis. The point here is paying attention to, or even better, measuring couplings can help trainers, because one of the things that happen with trainers that or observers or evaluators that observe a team, it's a team, it's at NAFRI or wherever, is that it's difficult for them to capture the group phenomenon, the systemic phenomenon. They look at someone, make sure that it's the guy's response is okay, but this response plus this response plus this response, and how it connects, how it combines together, is well captured by this, because it analyzes the group phenomenon at the systemic level. Another thing that we did at during the simulation exercises, and what's very interesting, is measuring the heart coherence. It measures the level of activation of the autonomous nervous system, and what's interesting is how, and it's linked directly to stress. So how people handle stress. Is a guy who is stressed, does it increases a lot in a stressful situation, or is the stress of the group, of each individual in the group, rising a little bit? But if it stays at the low level, that's fine. You need some stress to act, but if it's too high, then you have a number of phenomena that happens and that are negative. So how stress is handled at through the interactions. Filming is a good thing, because people see their actual behaviors, and it's better than just presentations. And we've come up with measurement of HR processes, ideas, more than ideas. The idea is, if you can measure how much an organization is doing along the 5 principles, HR principles, it's interesting for the simulation, but it's interesting because next year when they do the next simulation, you can measure the impact of all the training or the experience that they've gained. And the last slide here is about HR and wildland fire community. There's a risk that you could get digested by the current culture. What I mean by that, I'm going to give a very short example. One of the principles is deference to expertise, and some have used this principle to say, for example, to leave a specific decision completely to division soup, for example. The IC was the division soup proposed a backfire, and the IC, thinking about this principle, said, "Oh, he's the one who knows, because he's a division soup and he knows the local condition, etc." So I was HRO and I let him decide. But what is missed here is that all the principles should be applied, are relational. It's by putting together, by sharing the expertise of the division soup who knows the local condition, who has a given experience, etc., and the expertise of the IC, that you can, by these interactions, come up with the right decision. So if you say deference to expertise equals more decentralization, you increase the, and it will lead to increasing the looseness of the coupling of the organization, which is doing more of what people are already doing. So that's why there is a risk of, you know, of HR being digested by current culture. Also, you should know that the Forest Service is probably one of the organizations that has been doing the most, have been conducting the most actions on HRO. A lot of work has been done on HRO. We've seen lots of efforts. So I think now it comes a time when you should reflect on what's been done, what's useful, what's not useful. You know, maybe parts of HRO that are not useful, that don't make sense, and capitalize on what's been done. And when you after this phase, then when you're confident about the validity of HRO in your organization, validity and usefulness, then I think you should start integrating HRO to the different factory models or different programs that that are going on. Yeah, let's go quickly. Another idea is to develop HRO is making NEMO teams HRO champions. So train them to HRO. And the last idea is that since HRO focuses on the quality of interactions, and since the teams will more and more be involved in large-scale disaster response efforts, either nationally or internationally, they will be working with people they're not used to working with. And if they're trained to have quality interactions with people, it can make a difference. So to sum up, managing the tension between control and mindfulness is a useful, I think, conceptual tool to engage complexity. It has implications with organizational culture, training, and operational tools, and it contributes to relate HRO to existing organizational knowledge. Now quickly, the conclusion. So it was a 2-year project that I think can be considered as a first step towards rich and deep mutual understanding, the French and the US teams. We've seen that in the French case it has started to trigger organizational changes and projects. So both organizations have developed 2 types of HRO skills. So this is why we found during this project that the exchanges were mutually beneficial. And it's a research that demonstrated the potential of the control mindfulness tension concept, developed coupling measures that could spot and quantify the control and mindfulness that is going on in the organization, and research that laid the foundation for HRO metrics, which we are developing right now. All right, that's the last slide, and I'd like to thank the French and US firefighters who really helped me a lot, gave their time. I would like to thank Carlene Roberts, Philippe Beaumont also for their supervision. And special thanks to those who worked hard with me and late at night many times. Camille, Peter, Jean-Pierre, I don't know if Jean-Pierre's here now, Dave, Jean also linking here. Thank you. So I think it's a question or discussion.
What I done now, this is Brenna McDowell again, is enabled Peter Martelli and if Mary Johnson, I think you may have lost audio, but I've sent you the pin again, enabled you both to be able to speak into your microphone so that you can ask any questions you may have of Renaud. And on the flip side, if we have folks in France who are going to be asking questions, Renaud will repeat those for us to be able to hear as well.
Here. So let me ask a question first, Dave, and it's probably one for you and Renaud. But on the science side of things, have you had interactions, say, with Sarah McCaffrey or Colin Hardy on our side, scientist side of things? Because I do wonder what we do to use these results as a baseline for further interaction between the two departments. In other words, I see things that the Forest Service can do, and probably Colonel Jorda has seen things that the French can do. Here, and it just appears to me that with the fire research that I'm asking Colin to do, and with the social science inquiries I'm asking Sarah to do, I'd be intrigued by having Renaud talk to probably Colin and Sarah about what we can do specifically on the HRO side, specifically springing from this project, to see if there's ways to link what I've asked Colin and his crew, and then Sarah more specifically with the social science piece to do. Then I suppose in what's exhibiting a high degree of control, but hopefully with some mindfulness, while I was sitting here, I sent some direction back to the folks statewide that said that Renaud and Dave at MWCG is engaged in a study about the future of incident management teams. In fact, we've kicked that off. We've briefed the executives, my peers and above. We've committed to some timelines, and we're studying some options to significantly reorganize the way we develop and structure incident management teams in the U.S. Now, therefore, what I'd really like to do, Dave, is I told Rich Qualley and Karen Wood and Bill Waterbury, I'd really like to have them coordinate with Mary and you, and I'd like them to listen to this presentation, Renaud, so that I think that it'd be an interesting segue as NWCG talks about the design of incident management teams into the future, that we ask ourselves how we redesign to include some of these HRO features in the IMT structure and in the IMT training. So there's some sense of timing there, because that project we've kicked off and it's going down the track. So punch the note on the BlackBerry and they've got that note. So I hope that we can get that done. So that was a statement that I hope that you can give this presentation to some of my operational people, and then the question that I'd really like to have you, Dave, maybe facilitate linkage with some of our scientists to ask about the specific application of this study into derivative applications that might have linkages to some of the things I've asked our scientists and researchers to do.
This is Dave Christensen. Just want to respond quickly to a couple of comments that Tom's made here, beginning with the question of if we've begun to work with Sarah McCaffrey and Colin Hardy. We have, but not directly and as aggressively as we would like to do. It's been more of an observation of each other than it has been a direct linkage and collaborative effort. And now with this encouragement from you to begin to look at ways to actually work together, I think that these are things that are very much of interest to all of us. Sarah and I especially have talked about a few things at the recent Human Dimensions in Wildfire Conference in San Antonio. And many of the presentations there, we could see direct linkages to HRO and how we could begin this integration process with many efforts that are already underway. The NWCG and their reorganization and their study of incident management teams and Mary's involvement with the corporate university, and that is already in the planning phases now, having been established as a solid business case for its being done at all. There's many opportunities now to begin the integration of efforts and look for ways to be mutually supportive. It's been one of the problems, I think, with HRO because it's been introduced piecemeal into the community, and many people have championed different things at different times and felt like this other thing may be a competing entity rather than supporting. And so things become automatically mutually exclusive without even really looking at how they could be done together to help one another. So yeah, your encouragement to do this and explore these things. I know Mary is very interested, especially in the corporate university, and I'll let Mary speak for herself if she can get her microphone up, but maybe she could type in a response as well into the chat log or enter that into the discussion later. But these are ideas that we are looking forward to beginning to really work on. And thanks for taking this.
Dave, this is Brenna McDowell. I do have one note from Mary. She had said the presentation to NWCG on IMT succession is on the 7th, and then it's open to the field for comment till the end of the season. And she noted that that was concerning Tom Harbour's conversation from a few moments ago.
This is Tom again, and I would say that what I want is that the conceptual alternatives about what we're going to do with team is going to be out soon. My sense of this HRO presentation, though, concerns how within those 4 or 5 broad alternatives, the question in my mind is, how do you design each of those alternatives so that no matter which alternative is selected, there's a higher likelihood of HRO behaviors in each of those alternatives. And I think this presentation could help the refinement and design of those alternatives. I guess one other thing while I've got the mic and we're passing the microphone around here is that maybe Dale, through the SFLAG or with our linkages with DHS or USFA, again, it might be interesting to see if we could establish some linkages with the Coast Guard or USFA, just to give them some update on what we found here. I will say parenthetically, Renaud, that it was interesting at the beginning of your presentation that part of the genesis for my interest on these studies revolves around the fundamental thesis that I've got, that there is increasing complexity that IMTs are going to have to deal with, and I've supplied myself with sufficient data to validate my own hypothesis, at least on the U.S. side. It's interesting to think that maybe there's not the data to support that thesis on the European side. So intriguing. Maybe there's not the same push there, although I'm pleased that the French, Colonel Jordan and the crew, have been engaged in trying to improve the IMT process.
Okay, and I also have a quick note, another from Mary. She says, I agree because our thinking on the alternatives are still in our current thinking mode. This presentation could be an asset. We need to change the way we think, and this would expand that out of the box.
Live fire, Renaud. Can you? Okay. For those who don't know me, I'm Gary Morgan. I'm from the Bushfire Cooperative Research Centre from Australia and New Zealand. But prior to that, I was a firefighter for 34 years and ended up as the chief in the state of Victoria, which is, for Australia down the southeast, had the most significant fires over recent years. So I'm really interested in this research because I believe that the 2 workshops we held last year in Australia and New Zealand on HRO received really positive reaction. To me, it's really about identification of the different cultures, and I saw that come out of your presentation today, and understanding the culture and understanding why people make certain decisions. And given if we're going to look at a changing global situation, then how do we make better decisions? And this is going to go a long way. And I'd be very keen to also have Australian and New Zealand researchers participate with you. And I understand you've had Mary Omedy and Christine Owens from Bushfire CRC indicating strong interest in what you're doing here. I'd be very supportive to put on the table that perhaps